Between You and Me. I have redone this intro about 4 times because I'm just suffering with technology issues, and if you notice that the camera changes slight positions within like maybe 20 minutes of this episode, it's because my battery ran out and I had to replace it, okay? Fair warning. But anyways, hi. Today we are getting into more relationship-centered subjects. If you listened to episode 11, you'd know that I really enjoy talking about relationships on this podcast. I feel like I've come to love investigating the thought process behind it and the psychology of relationships and being in a relationship and how people act, mindsets, etc. And today I want to answer the question, are you ready for a relationship? This is probably the number one asked question when it comes to anything revolving relationships, and that statistic is coming out of my ass, but I just feel like it probably is. Before we get into it, now is your chance to email questionsbetweenyouandme@gmail.com with any of your relationship questions, so that towards the end of the season, I'll be able to gather a bunch of them and be able to specifically answer your guys' questions. Today, we're just going to be directly answering how to know if you are ready for a relationship. So yeah, but I wanted to throw that out there. Also, at Between You and Me podcast on Instagram, at Between You and Me pod on TikTok, and of course, at Between You and Me pod on YouTube, which some of you are probably watching on there. Anyways, go and follow those. Don't forget to rate the podcast on whatever platform you might be listening on and like the video. All right, now that we've got that out of the way. This might be, like I said before, one of the most asked questions when it comes to relationships, especially when it comes to advice. I think we have 2 different types of people in this world. One is the type of person who constantly is jumping into relationships, is dating nonstop, and doesn't stop to reflect on if they are ready for a relationship, if they have what it takes when it comes to their mentality, when it comes to how they carry themselves, how they communicate with other people, how deep their vulnerability goes. And then there's also the group of people who over worry, who never feel like they're ready, who think something is always stopping them. And this episode is for you guys. I fell in the latter option when I got into my current relationship, and I was definitely overthinking nonstop. I was like, am I ready? Do I have like the skills? Am I in the right mindset? And I definitely wasn't, which is why it took me a long time in between the phase of meeting my boyfriend to dating him. Because of that, I feel like I definitely learned a lot about what it takes to be in a healthy relationship and the skills that you kind of have to have, which no one really prepares you for, right? Like, no one explains this when you're a teenager, of the things that are very vital to have a successful relationship, apart from the basics like communication and loyalty and things that we hear very often. But there are a plethora of other things that are just as important. And without all these little puzzle pieces, I think that there is going to be a lot of lack in the relationship, which might lead to a lot of problems and inevitably the relationship not really working out. So asking yourself these set of questions, which I'm going to be talking about, is a great way to sit down, reflect, see if you right now are in the headspace to be trying to meet someone, to be in a relationship with them, or if maybe you need a little bit more time to work on certain things that I mentioned that would help and benefit you to have a successful relationship in the future. So we're going to hop right into the questions, and these are questions that you are going to sit down and ask yourself. So the first thing I would ask myself if I was wondering if I'm ready for a relationship is, am I going into it with optimism or am I going into it with negativity? There is a fine line between like over positivity, over optimism, like being chronically positive, although you might not consistently believe it, and you're trying to force yourself into a positive mindset. So that's not what I'm talking about here. And I'm not talking about you having to be positive 24/7, because I think we all know that's not a very realistic option. But what I'm saying here is when you think about the idea of a relationship, if you have a person in mind already and you think about being in a relationship with them, does your mind automatically go to the negatives? Are you constantly thinking about what could go wrong, how they could treat you badly, how maybe you'll treat them badly, how potentially you feel like they're so great right now, but there's going to be some kind of shoe that's going to drop. There is something bad that you're going to find out about them, and that inevitably the relationship will crash and burn. These are mindsets to look out for, negative thinking patterns to be conscious of, because when I got into my relationship, initially I was comparing it to the pain that I had experienced in past relationships and how it ended in a lot of disappointment. So it was almost a uncontrollable thought pattern to think, well, this will probably end in disappointment as well. The examples that I'm going to give you about my thought process within the beginning of my relationship are no longer obviously the same. And when I say beginning of the relationship, it's also prior to us officially dating. So that's a good thing to know, because these things were kind of talked through, communicated on, nitpicked, and worked on before I had entered the relationship. But in the same breath, they were also continuously worked on, like, to this day. Like, there's still things that come up, there's still things that we talk about, there's still things we work on, obviously, because that is a relationship, which I'll get into. But primarily the bigger themes were spoken about before dating. And that's not to say that you have to be perfect before getting in a relationship, but it is important to question these negative thoughts that you're having and try to figure out why you're having them in order to get rid of them, get rid of these thoughts that inevitably your relationship will end. Because like I've spoken about in multiple relationship episodes and just episodes in general when it comes to your mindset, I think that when you're so gung-ho about the fact that something will fail, the thing is that your thoughts will breed your reality. So consistently thinking that something's not going to work, it's like there's an 80% chance that it's not going to work because you are so committed to that thought. You really truly believe it. So your body, your mind, the way that you live your life every day, the choices that you make, the decisions you make, they're going to lead with that belief that something's not going to work out. Like I said, optimism is not necessary 100% of the time. It's okay to have a realistic point of view and to think, okay, you know what? The relationship might not be forever. There's a potential that it will end based on the way that life is. We are not in control of everything. So it's good to be aware of the potential outcomes, but completely 100% believing that it will crash and burn, that's not a good mindset to have. Because of this, working on your past traumas, the things that made you believe that, for example, like I said, my last relationship ending in disappointment made me believe that the current relationship would end the same way, stopped me from being able to look at a relationship in a positive lens. When two people are creating a relationship off of positivity, off of, dreams of good things that could come out of it, of growth that you could make together, of goals that you could achieve together, this is such a good, positive foundation to start a relationship off of. And I highly recommend that you find it in yourself to begin looking at relationships or a relationship with a certain person in this light. I don't think there's much downside that can come from viewing things optimistically and somewhat realistically as well. When it comes to relationships, I think practicing positive mindset in all areas of your life is extremely beneficial. And specifically in this case, it can bring a much lighter perspective and happier perspective on what your future may hold with another person. All right, so the next question I would recommend to ask yourself is, am I happy with who I am on my own? There's a tendency for some of us who are either getting into our first relationship, like what happened to me when I was younger, or maybe you've been single for a long time and you've really been kind of like daydreaming about having this companionship with a person or this relationship, this ideal relationship. And you get into a relationship and it becomes your whole personality trait. I'd say this is a red flag. I think that there's nothing wrong with loving your relationship, talking about your relationship and like being very vocal about it and the passion that you have for this person. But what I mean by making it your whole personality is that you don't do anything that doesn't revolve around this person. Sure, maybe you do have to go to work. Maybe you have to do errands, take care of your pets, whatever, like the basics of life. But when it comes to things that matter outside of your relationship, you've stopped them altogether, or you don't have any and you're not going out to find any new ones. You don't take time to spend time with your friends. You don't prioritize your family. You're not making time for your hobbies, going to the gym, exercising, things that are good for you, going out and doing anything with anyone other than your partner. And this can breed a very deep sense of codependency. It's honestly dangerous to a certain extent because chances are this relationship won't work because two humans are not supposed to rely on each other for everything that they possibly need. So when things become too codependent, one person's always leaning on the other and the other person can't really take it. If two people are so deeply dependent on each other, it tends to become toxic as well. And that creates a lot of conflict. So when that relationship doesn't work out, if it doesn't work out, like I said, chances are high, you're left with like this void of who you are. You don't know who you are without this person. And sometimes breakups can feel like that, although you do have a better grasp of who you are, and that's just because that person has been there for so long. But the depth of which that like pain hurts you is very high because you've put every ounce of yourself into this person and you haven't put any energy into anything else. This is why asking yourself if you're happy on your own is so important, because you need to have these things in your life. You need to have these things that, you know, make you happy, that fill your cup, that just make you excited about life. And again, there's no problem in spending time with your partner and being excited to go do things with your boyfriend on the weekend and, you know, prioritizing plans with them, but also making sure that there's a balance when it comes to this. So when you have already had this kind of relationship built up with yourself prior to getting into a relationship, you are going to stick to these things. You're going to stick to your daily jog in the morning. You're going to stick to your weekly yoga class. You're going to make sure that you see your friends every other week. You know, like these things make you happy even without this person. You feel fulfilled already in your work life, or you feel happy with the, you know, state of your life with your family or whatever it is, so that you're not so reliant on the happiness from another person. A huge aspect to dating prior to being ready is the fact that someone is trying to fill some sort of void or take happiness from the relationship in a life that doesn't feel very happy. Like I said, there's a lot of downfall to this and a lot that can hurt you if the relationship doesn't work out. You're left very, very empty. And the whole point of this podcast episode is so that you guys avoid future pain, is so you're prepared almost for things that could potentially go wrong, but also feeling more complete within yourself so that if things were to go wrong, yes, you might feel pain, but you'll be able to fill your cup again, you know, because you've learned how to. It's much easier to enter a relationship from a place of strength and a place of like self-acceptance and self-love because you are stable on your own, and you'll be a lot more conscious of who you're allowing into your life and not just allowing anyone based on the fact that you are craving something to make you happy. All right, the next question to ask yourself is if you are emotionally capable of being able to support someone and being able to be there for someone. This is one of my most important things, I think, when it comes to a relationship. Like, I'd put this somewhere near the top, although all of these are very important. But I think inherently relationships are very selfish. We tend to think like, oh, what can this person bring to us? What can they do for us? Like, what do they bring to the table? But rarely do we reflect and think, oh, like, do I have what it takes to support this person? Do I have what it takes to make them feel good or to satisfy their emotional needs and give them the, life that they wanted with a partner? We fail to recognize if we're emotionally open enough to carry someone else's burdens and to support someone else in times of need. There are a couple things that are really important when it comes to supporting someone emotionally. That's 1, vulnerability, 2, communication, and 3, curiosity and openness. So like 3 and 4. These things require a level of emotional intelligence. The more aware you are of your own emotions, the more vulnerable you can be with yourself, the more open you are to your own emotions, the better you will be at receiving that from someone else. So being emotionally intelligent is so important, like so unbelievably important. If you can't do that for yourself, if you don't take the time to recognize your own pain, your own struggles, the things that you're going through, and help yourself heal through them and help yourself work through them, there's a very slim chance you'll be able to do it for other people, unless you're very good at like separating things like that. I don't know. It's vital to be able to be vulnerable enough to make someone else feel safe to come to you with their needs, their issues, their problems. And that's not to say that you're going to be an emotional dump for another person, because that's also not healthy. But it is to say that you need to be open enough to allow the other person to freely come to you when they may be struggling or when they feel like they need to ask you for something in the relationship. What it looks like when someone isn't emotionally available and doesn't have this mindset is stonewalling. When someone comes to you and says, I don't feel, cared about enough because you've been going out every weekend and not prioritizing me. And you look at them and you're like, all of my friends are in relationships and they're going out every weekend. I don't know what you're talking about. I care about you. I show you I care about you all the time. Like, I can't even understand why you're saying that. This is an element of you not understanding that your partner's coming to you with an emotion that they're feeling. They're not feeling cared about enough. And your reasoning is to not understand, not accept, and refuse to hear their comments. Worse than that would be just ignoring them completely, which is stonewalling as well. So, yeah. This is really important. I'm very passionate about this because a lot of people are very excited, very happy to experience all the good parts of the relationship, all the love, all the happiness, the laughs, the good times. But as soon as something flips and there's a problem, a wall comes up. They're not open. They're not vulnerable. They're not able to be having positive communication between two people in the sense of a conflict happening. So being very aware of your emotional intelligence, and if you have to work on that, so important. So this one goes hand in hand with the last one because it also very much has to do with emotions and emotional intelligence. But the question that you're going to ask yourself now is, are you ready to be triggered? Like I said, a lot of people don't expect relationships to come with negatives. They think that things are going to be happy-go-lucky, positive, rainbow, sunshine, and oh my God, a problem comes up, or oh my God, you feel triggered, or oh my God, they did something that pissed you off. It's like, oh, I wasn't expecting those emotions. I wasn't expecting to feel that way, but lo and behold, it happens. This was me not a year ago, probably. The beginning of my relationship was obviously very, very filled with love and light and honeymoon stage and everything. And then things started to crack down. Triggers were being opened up. Past wounds were being opened up. Things that I hadn't addressed when it comes to my thoughts on relationships, my thoughts on trust, my thoughts on more serious matters coming out. And it's important to recognize that your relationship will trigger you. That's just the way it is. If your relationship doesn't trigger you, I don't think two people are open enough with each other. I don't think they're vulnerable enough, because when you have this openness in a relationship, you're bound to do things to each other that will bother each other. Hopefully they're unintentional, because chances are they will be. And people will just be acting the way they're used to. And then they'll realize, oh, the other person really didn't like that. Or vice versa. You'll really not like something that another person did, and it will really trigger you emotionally. These things, although suckish, you don't want to be triggered, are very beneficial if handled the correct way. And of course, I'll tell you the correct way. The correct way to handle a person being triggered in a relationship is, one, to not overreact, not bombard the person with how much they've hurt you, and make it the end all be all. Address it calmly, address it in a nice way, obviously, because chances are if you're triggered by something, you're going to be very, very emotional about it. So being very conscious about how you go about communicating this is important. Two, your partner should be healing this trigger over time. When they soothe this area of whatever it is that you're having trouble accepting, that you feel insecure about, that there is an area of your past, that there's a wound that's being brought up, they should be able to reassure, communicate, help you feel confident in that certain area. Obviously, not all the work is on them. It should be a two-way street, a back and forth cooperation. But over time, you're able to soothe whatever it is that you got triggered by. For example, if phones are a trigger for you, which for me, it was. Having a phone face down on a table, or seeing someone be very fidgety with their phone and moving it away from me. Whatever it is that had to do with a phone, I was, and still am a little bit, triggered by. So if there's ever a mistake that happened, if I ever, saw, someone lock their phone really quickly, it would trigger things. And this is kind of to a lighter degree, because they're very small actions. But which I've done both of these reactions, one, I start freaking out. I'm like, why'd you do that? Why you close your phone? And you start investigating and interrogating and blah, blah, blah. You're not going to get the response that you want. If you calmly express hey, because of X, Y, and Z in my past, phones are a little bit of a sticky subject for me. I feel uncomfortable when you do this. And it would make me feel better if you didn't do that. And then your partner goes, oh, wow, I didn't think about it that way. I obviously don't want you to feel like that. So what can I do to help? And then you work through it. You find what works for you guys, whether that's knowing the other person's password, or them being more conscious of not fidgeting with their phones and making it look weird, these small things also are not a lot to ask. So that's why this is a good example, because it's kind of easy to adjust small things to make another person feel safe. But over time, you're going to feel that, sense of relief when it comes to things like that happening, because they've been so comforting with something that has brought you a lot of stress and anxiety in the past. So being able to be triggered and be soothed is so important. Being ready to be triggered, and knowing that you can't overreact and go crazy is even more important, because then these triggers will only pile up and intensify rather than being able to be soothed. Okay, this one's also very important. These all are. I don't need to keep repeating that. But the next question is, do I know what I want and need in a partner? This, oh my goodness, is so vital. It's slightly similar to the question that I asked if you're happy on your own. Because in this sense, when you have this security in yourself, when you have this confidence, you're able to ask for what you want in another person. If you're coming from a place of lack and you're consistently a people pleaser and you're always wanting to do things for others and make them happy and not expect anything in return and inevitably not get anything in return, you're going to be in a relationship where someone walks all over you. You need to be able to stand up for yourself and also have strong judgment in a sense of finding someone that will be able to give you what you want when you need it. During the beginning stages, the talking stages, this is when it is the most important to be very expressive about what you like, what you dislike, your core values, how someone can make you feel loved, the things that you don't like, and be able to receive that from another person as well. This type of communication is so key to understanding if someone's going to be able to, fulfill your needs and allow you to feel loved in the way that you want to be loved. There's so many different types of people in this world. Some people are very low maintenance. They'll feel loved with a kiss on the cheek every morning. And then there's higher maintenance people. If you're meeting a nonchalant man and you are a high maintenance woman, you need to evaluate if this is the type of person that is going to give you what you want and what you need. Sometimes we meet people, we really like them. They're a good person and they have everything, all these characteristics that you like, but they're not giving you what you want. They're not catering to these emotional needs, physical needs, mental needs that you've expressed to them that you want. So in this case, although they can be a nice person, it just means that this person is not ready for a relationship or they're not the right fit for you. So being a lot more aware about this when getting into relationships, and even prior to that, already knowing what you want based off of your past, based off of experiences you've gone through, this is going to prepare you to have a successful relationship in your future because you are more knowledgeable on what it takes for someone to be in a relationship with you. Quick disclaimer, it's also important to not overdo it. I'm saying this directed to people who lack the ability to communicate this to people and who feel like they shouldn't have to ask or who don't want to, beg for things. But if you are a nitpicky type of person, which I am, and you're constantly trying to fixate on like what another person can do better and what they could possibly do wrong, so you want to tell them things to prevent them from doing things wrong, and like you kind of have that edge for like always wanting to be in control, then be careful of crossing the line of doing too much and addressing too many things and putting too much pressure on the person. Like, do it in a balanced way, a way that feels natural, not in a way where you're trying to prevent anything bad from happening, so you over communicate all of the things that you need and make sure that they're going by the, formula that you set out. That's not super healthy either. Find that balance of what works for you. Be communicative in a soft and gentle way of like explaining that this is what you need and accept the answer that you get back from that person. All right, the last question that I have is to ask yourself, am I willing to compromise and sacrifice to grow with someone? This is also very relative to what I just spoke about, which is letting go of control. If, like I said, you're a person who is in constant need and grasp of control. When you're in a relationship, you're sharing control with another person. You only have your 50%. You're not able to control everything. So being able to sacrifice areas of your life and know that you're capable of growing with another person is very vital. There's things that we've learned in our past of the way relationships should be, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we're right. Another person has a completely different worldview, especially if you're just meeting this person. You have so much to learn about them, so much to learn about the way that they've grown up, the way that they've adapted their lives to do things a certain way. So being able to compromise with a person when it comes to conflict, when it comes to your living situation, if you live with them, or, how you're going to cater to each other. There's so many different elements of a relationship that rely on compromise, and being able to kind of take your perspective and say, okay, this is not the only way to do things, and merge with another person and figure out something that works for the two of you is very important. There's no my way or the highway in relationships. And yeah, maybe sometimes you'll listen to one person's perspective a little bit more than the other, sure. But I think that you should always make room for two perspectives and make sure that both voices are being heard, because there's nothing worse than another person being stomped on for the eternity of a relationship. And I feel like that's like such a trope in TV shows, and sometimes you see it in real life too, where one person in a relationship is just controlling everything and the other person's kind of just being pulled along and looks very unhappy and not content with their life. So unless you want to end up like those guys, I'd say be conscious of how much control you're craving and how much control you're trying to get. If you're the opposite person on the spectrum and you're the one that, is very nonchalant and doesn't really put a lot of their ideas to the front or their perspective to the front, be a little bit more proactive about it, because the only thing that's going to fuel a controlling person or a person who leads like that is someone who follows. So keep that in mind. So those were all my 6 questions, I'm pretty sure, on things to ask yourself prior to getting into a relationship. I made these the most important things in my perspective that are vital to figuring out prior to getting in a relationship in order to have a successful one, because there are so many other things that I think stop people from getting into relationships. A lot of arbitrary things like, do you have enough money? Are you on the right course in life? Do you have your shit together? Things like this that realistically are not going to happen right away, or you'll never really know if you're on the right path, and like things like that we use as excuses to prevent ourselves from going out and finding relationships and finding love. And these things are not important, I think. I think that what I mentioned in this episode are very foundational mindset shifts to be aware of and to have before getting in a relationship, but then also not panicking about it. Like, don't panic about not being perfect, because through a relationship, you will continue to learn these things. If you have a good grasp on them, if you're aware of them, if you know your faults and you are trying to change them, you're good, honestly. I think there's only a problem with getting into a relationship if you genuinely believe that you're not. Because being ready for a relationship at the end of the day is a choice, and you choose to be ready. So when you choose to address these things in your life and be sure about yourself, know your boundaries, know what you need from a person, you're ready to sacrifice, you're ready to grow. When you're sure of all these things, when you choose to put your time into these things and make sure you're ready for a relationship, then you just are. So don't worry, don't pester on the question, don't panic about it. These things will come naturally and you'll find someone. Okay? Oh my gosh, that's so great. So yeah, don't forget, you're ready when you choose to be ready. There's so much growth that happens within a relationship as well, that you don't have to be perfect at all. These questions are to help you reflect and to give you better chances of successful relationships, but you by no means have to be perfect, okay? I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Rate the episode, rate the podcast overall on whatever platform you're listening on and watching. Comment down below what you think is also important to be ready for before you get in a relationship. And I will talk to you guys in my next episode. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.